It was a quiet evening in a small downtown café, the kind that smelled faintly of roasted coffee beans and rainy sidewalks. Ethan sat at a corner table, his fingers nervously tracing the rim of a coffee cup that had gone cold. It was his first date in years, a blind date his friend had convinced him to go on after months of solitude following his divorce. He had promised himself not to expect too much, but as the minutes turned into an hour, hope quietly dissolved into disappointment. The seat across from him remained empty, and so did his chest. The waitress passed by with a sympathetic smile, refilling his cup, even though he hadn't taken a sip of the last one. He managed a polite nod. Maybe she wasn't coming. Maybe life was just reminding him again how easily people disappeared when you needed them most. He reached for his wallet, ready to pay and leave, when the cafe door creaked open and a small figure hurried inside. A little girl, no older than 6, her pink raincoat dripping water onto the tiled floor. She looked around with wide, searching eyes until they landed on him. Then she smiled and walked straight toward his table. "Excuse me, sir," she said in a tiny, polite voice, clutching a folded napkin in her hand. "My mommy's sorry she's late." Ethan blinked, unsure if he'd heard her right. "Your mommy?" She nodded, her pigtails bouncing. "Yes. She said she had to park far away, and she asked me to tell you not to go." The little girl climbed onto the chair across from him, the same one that had felt so painfully empty a moment ago, and set her small backpack on the table like she'd done this before. Ethan couldn't help but smile. "You must be very brave coming in all by yourself." "Mommy says I'm her little helper," she said proudly. "And she said you might be sad because you thought she forgot you, but she didn't. She never forgets nice people." Something in the child's innocent words softened him. He found himself chuckling quietly, the kind of laugh that feels like a small surrender. "What's your name?" "Lily." "That's a pretty name." "Thank you. What's yours?" "Ethan." "That's nice too," she said thoughtfully before adding, "You look like someone who gives good hugs." He laughed again. It was such a pure, disarming observation that he couldn't think of a reply. "Well, I try my best," he said, smiling. They talked as they waited, about school, her favorite stuffed animal, and the chocolate milk she ordered when the waitress came by. Ethan found himself strangely at peace, the sound of her laughter filling the space that had felt so painfully empty before. There was something magical about children, their ability to heal places in your heart you didn't know were wounded. 20 minutes later, the cafe door opened again. A woman rushed in, her hair damp from the rain, eyes searching anxiously. When she spotted Lily, relief washed over her face. "Lily," she exclaimed, hurrying over. "I told you to wait outside." The little girl grinned mischievously. "But Mommy," he looked sad. The woman's eyes turned to Ethan then, and in that single glance, everything paused. She was breathtaking, not in the way magazines describe beauty, but in the quiet, tired, real way of someone who had weathered too much yet still smiled through it. "I'm so sorry," she said, breathless. "Traffic was terrible, and Lily insisted she could come tell you I was coming." Ethan shook his head, smiling warmly. "No apology needed. She's been wonderful company." The woman smiled, brushing a strand of wet hair behind her ear. "She usually is. I'm Grace." They shook hands, and something gentle passed between them. Not sparks, not love at first sight, just an understanding, a kindness. As they talked, Ethan learned that Grace was a nurse, recently widowed, raising Lily on her own. Tonight wasn't just a blind date for her, it was her first attempt to rejoin life after years of holding everything together for her daughter. "I almost didn't come," she admitted softly. "It felt selfish, trying to find happiness again when I barely managed to keep things together." Ethan looked at her, seeing not the fatigue but the strength beneath it. "Sometimes," he said quietly. Being kind to yourself is the most selfless thing you can do, because the people who love you, they need you happy too. Her eyes glistened, and she nodded, as if she'd been waiting to hear those words. The evening went on beautifully. They laughed, shared stories, and for a while, the world outside that little café simply didn't exist. Lily drew doodles on napkins, giggling whenever Ethan pretended to guess what they were. When it was time to leave, the rain had stopped. Grace gathered Lily's coat, and Ethan walked them to their car. "Thank you for tonight," she said softly. "It's been more healing than I expected." "No," Ethan replied gently, smiling down at Lily. "Thank you. I think your little girl just reminded me what hope looks like." Lily reached up and took his hand. "Mommy says when people meet at the right time, it's because God wants them to help each other." Ethan looked at Grace, then back at Lily. "Well, I think God has excellent timing." They exchanged numbers, promising to meet again soon, not because of obligation, but because it simply felt right. A week later, Ethan stopped by the hospital where Grace worked, leaving a small gift bag at the reception with a note that read, "For the bravest nurse and the sweetest little helper, thank you for reminding me that some meetings aren't coincidences, they're answers." Inside was a tiny stuffed bunny for Lily and a coffee mug for Grace that said, "Kindness is never wasted." Months passed, and that chance meeting bloomed into something more, not rushed or perfect, but beautifully human. Ethan began volunteering at the children's wing of the hospital, inspired by Grace's work. Together, they started a small community program that brought joy to kids spending long days in hospital beds. Lily called him Mr. Hugs, a name that never failed to make everyone smile. And on one quiet evening, while they were all walking home, Lily held Ethan's hand and said softly, "I told you, Mommy never forgets nice people." Grace looked at him, her eyes full of gratitude and something deeper. Love, maybe, or the gentle recognition that life sometimes brings people together, not to fill an emptiness, but to remind them that emptiness can bloom into something beautiful. The night air was cool, and the streetlights shimmered on wet pavement. They walked on, three silhouettes bound by fate and kindness, laughter echoing into the quiet of the world. Because sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin when you're ready to give up, and someone small, pure, and full of love walks in to remind you that life, even when late, never forgets to show up.